Welcome to another episode of NextGenDDS. This is one of your hosts, Mario Santiago, and with me I have my co-host, Dr. Scott Menaker. How are you, Scott?
Hey, I'm doing great, Mario. It's great to be here again, and looking forward to kind of chatting about some interesting topics. We're going to kind of take it a little bit in your direction a little bit. We've done our first as we're talking through this season on getting your advisors. We're talking probably more in my area in terms of the dental side and the transition side, but we're really going to talk about the next set of advisors and people on your team that are going to be crucial for, I'd probably call it the next 40 plus years. You may not work that long, but you're certainly going to need good advice and guidance. So, I'm going to kind of throw it over. I'll chime in a little bit on my experiences with CPAs and how they do that. But let's talk through kind of your thoughts on what are you looking for in what should doctors, especially young doctors, what should they be looking for in their CPA?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the CPA conversation usually starts with when you buy a business because it's a lot more complex. I'll be honest, if you're a W-2 employee, you may not need a CPA. You might just be able to hop on TurboTax and do it on your own.
That's right.
So I'm the first one to say that if you have some sort of business or LLC, at that point, it may be worth it to hire a CPA. They'll really do a mix of two things for you. And there's probably all these words that get thrown around that people don't know what they mean. They do the books, these magical books that people talk about.
Whatever that means, right?
But essentially, what's called the bookkeeping is keeping track, if we're going to put it in a basic form, keeping track of the expenses in your practice, keeping track of like invoices, categorizing things into the right categories within what's called your profit and loss statement, keeping track of all that. And then number two is really filing your tax returns. And with that, some CPAs out there also will work with you to mitigate your taxes. Now, we're going to take a pretty deep dive at that one because, and Scott, you can give us some background on this, but I think the CPA industry has really changed over time. I think maybe before CPAs were giving a little bit more advice.
Sure.
Would you agree?
Yeah. And
okay.
So I had the benefit over the years. I have an identical twin brother, and my brother was a CPA. And so Steve was not a tax guy, but he was he was in the audit world, but certainly understood kind of the base. He had a very, very good understanding of the accounting world.
Yeah.
And once I'd been my journey was I was an associate that didn't work, and then an associate that worked that led to a partnership. And we had a bookkeeper and an accounting firm that kind of did stuff. And I think that one of the big issues is a lot of dentists, I don't think, understand what it is their accountant is doing for them.
Yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit and maybe in a bit about what are some of those questions that you should be asking, because there can be a broad range of topics.
Yeah.
But my brother was there Steve was there to help kind of do things. And so when my partner left and I was on my own, and I was in a bad situation where I found out that my partner was putting his personal expenses into the business and I was paying for them. So you can calling that stealing from me. I had probably a lot of other choice words, but I learned a lesson from his the managing partner of their firm. They had a small firm that he'd become a partner of. But I went in to see Aaron one day as I was thinking of buying the practice, and he said to me, "So Scott, are the numbers good?" And I said, "Yeah, they're good." He said. And he looked at me again, and I knew Aaron. I mean, I knew his personally as well. But he said, "Scott," he said, "are the numbers good?" And I said, "Yeah, I've looked at the P&Ls, and they're good." And he looked at me again, and he said, "Are the numbers good?" And it goes to your point of categorizing things and putting things in the right place. So I went back on a Saturday morning and started looking through the files. And I started looking into all of the vendors, and I started looking at matching credit card things to the P&L. And guess what?
Something wasn't adding up.
The numbers weren't good. We were in the throes of getting this deal done. I called my lawyer and said, you're going to have to come bail me out of jail because I'm getting ready to go strangle somebody
Yeah.
and beat them to a pulp. Because I wasn't making any money. I was struggling as a young dentist, going back 37 years ago. And my partner, who I thought was a good partner, was stealing from me.
Yeah.
But he gave me a real lesson in understand the numbers.
Yeah.
And that's where I kind of got to where I paid every bill. I wanted to see every invoice. I wanted to make, and even if it was just me, I wanted to make sure I understood where they're going. So when you talk, when you get clients that start talking to you about, hey, what do I look for in a CPA? What kind of guidance do you get? Because I'm sure, from your work, working with doctors in their business and their tax planning, there's some really good accountants out there and CPAs, and there's some really terrible ones.
Yeah, and I'm guessing you'd say the same about
dentists. I would absolutely do that. I never threw anybody under the bus, but there were not.
No, and I'm not here to talk bad about CPAs. I want to just shed a little bit of light about what's happening. And I'd say 9 out of 10 of the calls we get here are, I'm looking for a new CPA. So a lot of it is for us to understand what is the frustration out there. And I'd say 2 main frustrations. One, I don't hear from my CPA. So doctors emailing, calling the CPA, they can't contact them, they can't get a hold of them, they don't answer for weeks. That's one. Number 2 is my CPA is not helping me reduce my tax bill. So what we've seen is that CPAs have just become more of number crunchers. They just prep your file your tax return, tell you how much you owe, and they roll it over to next year. So nobody likes to get a call from their CPA saying, you owe $100,000, write me a check by Monday. And that's another thing that's happening is that...
That's a scary place to be. I never got that one, but that's a...
Well, we get a lot of people doing that because the CPA doesn't communicate with them, doesn't let them know. One of the common things that we tell people to look for in a CPA is, hey, are they doing a third quarter projection? Meaning... has your practice done by the third quarter of the year to understand if you've paid enough to the government to be okay? Because you are supposed to pay as you go as a taxpayer. And a lot of people, if their practice grew by $500,000, your taxes are also going to go up. But if the CPA isn't looking at the numbers, they have no clue that's happening.
That's exactly right.
There's going to be a surprise. So,
and you've got, I'll go to one of the things you said earlier, is most doctors, most young dentists we're talking to today, you're going to start as a W-2. So, you're getting all your taxes paid,
through withholding.
And the withholdings, they're all going in. You just kind of take whatever goes into your bank account and you spend it.
Yep.
Depending on your structure as a business, most of them, you're going to be paying you're going to making estimated tax payments every quarter.
Yes. And
if your first and second quarter are not right, it gets even worse as you go down the road. So you need somebody to do that. And so I think maybe the first question that you want to ask as you're if you're looking for a CPA is, what kind of services should I expect out of you?
Yeah, and that's where I want to bring people to reality, Scott, because a lot of people are looking for this tax planning and really proactive tax planning, and I'm going to be honest that's not most CPAs. That's where someone in my role comes in.
Absolutely.
So I am a CPA, but I'm not the person who files tax returns and does the bookkeeping out of practice. I do more of the tax strategy and the tax planning. So how we usually work with people is we sit down with doctors, we go through their personal life, their practice, their tax planning, come up with a very solid tax strategy, and then we hand that tax strategy to the CPA. CPA 9 out of 10 times says, this looks awesome, I'm going to implement it. Thankfully, I didn't have to come up with this because it would have taken a lot of hours.
And I guess the thing that we're getting to is a lot of them are just not set up to go do that.
No.
And so you need a good CPA that's going to help handle your books, file your tax returns. If you've got a corporation, you need a corporate return and a personal return. Mm-hmm. You want somebody who's got the ability to provide that in a timely and a good fashion, help you take advantage of some of the tax things that are out there. Mm-hmm. But I think you just got to be very careful that if that person isn't set up to do that, if they're not geared to do that, don't have that expectation that they're going to do it.
Yeah.
So ask the question on the front end, what are the services that you're going to provide? What can I expect? And if you're unsure of that, or you're unsure if they're going to meet those, go talk to somebody else.
Yeah.
Or call us here and call us at McGill and Lyon, and we'll be happy to. Simply, we love talking to people, no charges for a lot of calls, but just to provide some guidance and advice, because it'll all lead to, we're going to help you down the road and you'll return.
And Scott, a lot of times people call me and they say, I want a new CPA. And I say, hold up, let's have a conversation. And we find out that their relationship with the CPA is actually perfectly normal. And I tell them, look, you really need to keep your CPA. You just need to hire us for the tax planning, and we'll continue that relationship with your CPA. Now, there are some other cases where I say, look, you really need to, we have a CPA firm that we use. Hey, you really need to use our CPA firm because they're going to do better work for you. But
and it's all going to be somewhat integrated. It's going to be more of a seamless kind of transition.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I would say, just to give people background on why people aren't getting the service they need from they want from their CPA. Once again, it's not to knock the CPA. They're just very overworked. They don't have the time to do all this tax planning you're looking for by looking at your personal finances, by looking at your practice overhead. Some firms do it, and there are firms that charge way too much, in my opinion. There's CPA firms that are charging well over $50,000 for CPA work. If you're paying that, you should not do that.
You should not do that.
Now, there's the other level, which is, let's say your local CPA. They might be charging you $5,000 to $10,000. They're doing fine work. A lot of times that works fine, and that's where you plug someone like us in. We provide tax strategy. The CPA records it. But then I would say there's a middle of the road CPA. Let's call it, could be $15,000 to $20,000. Don't quote me, but somewhere around that range, that does really good quality work, timely work. You hear from them. That's probably the range a lot of people fall into. There is a world out there of dental CPAs. In my opinion, that's just like a branding thing.
For sure.
You could have a good CPA that's not dental, and look, we tell them the one or two things that we know they should do, and we're fine. But the reason these CPAs aren't providing a lot of this tax planning, just to give people some background, is there's not a lot of CPAs out there. So in order to become a CPA, you need to get extra credits. When you're in school, you need to get 150 credits. Most people go to college and they get 120 credits?
Not even that much, I don't think.
You either have to stay an extra year and get a master's, which is what I did and some of my friends had to do, and to then sit for the exam. Then you have to sit for 4 exams. And to be frank, the pay in entry-level accounting CPA jobs at the best firms in the country is not amazing. So in my opinion, there's not this like huge incentive to become one. But that is changing. There is a lot of that changing in the CPA industry, just to say that CPAs are in demand. And that's why a lot of people, go out of CPA shops and work in consulting or other firms. So there are different levels of CPA, but I'd say if you're looking for something is, hey, who are you going to be talking to? Are you going to get passed down by 20 different people? What's the firm that you're working with? Are the fees reasonable? I think you mentioned this to me once. What am I getting for those fees?
I think that's probably the first question is what kind of service and what level, what are you going to do for me? And maybe you don't know that one yet, but you got to start asking the question. And as you go along in your career, that will certainly get more complicated.
Yeah.
Because, you may go from, 2 or 3 employees to now you've got 14 and you've got all kinds of other plans and you've got benefits and you've got different things that just need to be in there. And maybe you're borrowing more money, and where is that and how is that showing up on your books? And so the things hopefully get more complicated, which means you're being more successful.
Yeah.
But your level of comfort, I had my wife and I did some consulting while I was practicing. I got into the numbers and really understood them, and we were helping younger dentists who were probably got to that 5 or 6 year thing. Sometimes we were saying you need to, a lot of it was we were referring them to go get some business and tax planning. But basically, one doctor was spending. He had absolutely no idea what his practice was doing. He was spending $1,200 a month for CPA service. Mm-hmm. And I just said to him, you could probably do this for $5,000 for what you're getting, what you need,
Yeah.
because you're not looking at your P&L.
Yeah.
You don't understand it. The CPA has not explained that to you, and they should, because if they just send you a balance sheet and a P&L and go, here you go,
Yeah.
throw it in the garbage.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to understand it. And so he was paying him a lot of money, and I just said, you're wasting well over $10,000 a year. And he goes, but I like my accountant.
That's what it comes down to a lot of
And
times,
I
right?
just said, I don't care whether you like him or not.
Yeah.
You're not getting any service for the amount of money you're spending. I said, why don't you pay your bills on QuickBooks so that you know where your money's going? Because that was his real problem. And you have an accountant behind you to help make sure that everything's getting categorized right. And a lot, you're not putting, I'll call it principal payments in your P&L. They should go on your balance sheet. And I had my brother to help me make sure I was doing those things right.
Yeah.
But my accountant would have done the same thing. But you need to understand what you want out of that relationship. And if you're just throwing money, I always said the best place for your money is in your pocket, not somebody else's. So make sure that your accountant, one, is as you said, you know who you're dealing with. Two, you're asking them the services they're going to provide for you. Is there any planning? And three, how are they going to communicate with you?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the piece that is a lot of times missing.
Yeah, and I see a lot of cases where, I want to go back and say that accountants should provide you advice, right? I'm just saying that they don't have the time to provide you all this, more creative advice that we give specifically to dentists. But I've had tons of doctors who come in and, something as simple as being a C Corp, it was more common back in the day. It's not very common now.
I was a C Corp.
You were a C Corp?
Yeah, and it was pretty difficult to unwind that.
It's not very common now, and I've met with a lot of people who I'm like, how long have you been with your CPA? Oh, 30 years. Why has this never come up about unwinding this C Corp?
And sometimes it was hard to. But going back many years, being a C Corp, there were some tax advantages to it, and that kind of changed. And S Corps came around, and so it was you didn't have to go through all of the trials and tribulations of being a C Corp. But unwinding that wasn't as simple as going, hey, listen,
do this.
I clicked it. I'm this at the end, December 31st, I'm no longer a C Corp, and you might want to go do that, but the government and the tax people were not going to be so kind. And so you got to have good advice from a CPA who says, how do I go do that? Fortunately, there's not that many C Corps. They're probably the legacy ones.
Exactly. Well, Scott, let me ask you this, because I want to hear from your perspective, because I think you'll simplify it for a lot of our listeners, since sometimes when I explain things, I'm too in the weeds in the CPA world. But from your end, we're throwing all these terms, something as simple. You mind explaining something as simple as what's a P&L? What is bookkeeping? Do you mind explaining that in your words?
Yeah. So let's say you bought a practice. At the end of the day, you now have your own, let's call it, you've got your own S Corp or you got your own LLC, and you've now got to start keeping track of all of your expenses. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to file all kinds of tax returns, and you're going to have all kinds of insurance, that some of that, your workman's comp and all of that's going to flow based on your payroll and all. And so you have to have a good accounting for where that is. But it also is going to tell you, how am I doing as a business? Yeah. Because we find when I was consulting, and you guys probably see it when you talk to dentists, they go, I'm swamped. I can't be any busier, and I'm not making any money. And so you want to use, and so the accounting software, let's call it QuickBooks, the most common one out there. Most doctors can, for a very small practice, simple practice. I had a pretty good sized practice. I was still doing all the books I was doing all the bills, paying them. It took me virtually no time in QuickBooks, but I knew where my money was going. Yeah. And so I could keep track of it. But that profit and loss statement, a P&L, gives you a month by month and a year over year comparison of where did my expenses for dental supplies go. And because there's some things that I know, Mary, you guys track four kind of main key areas that really will determine your profitability or not.
Yeah.
We may spend the time maybe going through that one day, but there's certain things that I knew when my dental supplies got out of whack. If it went from, let's call it 6% to 11%, the first person I was having a conversation with was my dental assistant, who also was doing my ordering.
Yeah.
And Lisa always had fortunately she always thought of it as her money, so she didn't want to spend it.
Yeah.
But she knew what she had to, but she would be able to give me a good example of, here's what we ended up having to do, or this came up and we needed to spend some money on the hygienist needed new curettes.
Yeah.
And we weren't buying the $30 ones. We were buying the $150 good ones because they help. So they're just different things.
Yeah.
But I understood what that is. But that P&L, looking at that every month, and not just looking at it, but comparing it to it and getting that in your brain, really understands where it is.
Yeah.
And now the balance sheet, you probably can speak to a balance sheet, but that's just a balance sheet is showing you your equity and your liabilities. And,
Yeah. That's about it.
And sometimes, yeah, and so you could be showing, let's call it, you could be showing $800,000 in debt.
Yeah.
For maybe you use that to buy the practice.
Yeah.
But that number should start coming down over time, and those are the kind of things that start showing up. But you want your accountant, I think, Mary, to your point, you want your accountant to explain that to you.
Yeah.
And if they are unwilling or unable to explain this to you, then you should go find another accountant.
Yeah, and I was going to say, Scott, you sound savvier than most people on the business and accounting side, probably because of your brother. But I always tell people one of the best things I've seen is when somebody hires a CPA firm that does everything, like the bookkeeping and the tax preparation work, because they're in sync. They know the numbers. Like I said, there's not as big of a surprise at the end of the year when the taxes hit. There are situations where, let's say, the CPA firm is here, but then you have a separate bookkeeper. That can work, but there's more risk because now the CPA may not get the books or the numbers till the end of the year, and they haven't been able to project your taxes throughout the year. So in an ideal scenario, this firm's doing both for you, unless you just have a really good relationship between the bookkeeper and the CPA
probably
firm.
a lot of docs may end up hiring their spouse to potentially be the bookkeeper.
Yeah.
Just be careful that your bookkeeper is doing. I won't go into that one, but yeah, I mean, sometimes you want to make sure that bookkeeper is actually doing things the right way so that you're not having to correct it or you're not getting bad data.
But that's one of those, Scott, where I would recommend spending the money on the CPA. You could do it, your spouse could do it, but number one, if you're doing it as the doctor, I always say, what is the opportunity cost of you doing all this accounting work? How much money would you have made doing a crown?
Yeah.
Right? So your time is better spent in the chair, even if it's just a couple more hours a week spending on bookkeeping. Number two, you're probably not going to do it as well as the CPA. Same thing with your spouse. It's like, I'd rather your spouse, if he or she is working at the practice, for them to spend time on things that actually drive growth, like marketing or things like that, versus spending time on the bookkeeping. So that's one of the things where I'd rather people actually spend the money, and I think it's going to be money well spent.
Yeah, and I don't. Yeah, and we're not saying overspend on it.
Yeah,
I still just can't reiterate enough. As a doctor, you need to understand where the money is going, and if it means that you pay the bills and do it. I got to my office early. I could do it between patients. I'd just done a crown prep. I had a fee-for-service practice. I wasn't writing off 30 or 40% to the insurance company. I said I could go put my feet up on the desk and go do a little, pay a few bills. It took me 5 minutes. I mean, again, part of this was I had a system. Over, after 30 years of doing this, it was second nature. I spent a lot more time on the front end. And again, I'll call it, I spent time with my CPA. He just happened to be my brother to start with, who really helped me say, a small business like yours can probably do a lot of this on your own. So
Yep.
it just becomes, what's your acumen? Do you want to go do it? I mean, we were having a firm get together the other day, kind of doing some goal setting. It was a great event, and one of the guys, one of our partners, Jonathan Martin, said to me, he goes, I think he was trying to prove a point. He says, "Hey," he goes, "when was the last time you cut the grass?" And I looked at it and I said to him, "Last Friday, 4 days ago." And he was like, that was not the answer I wanted. I haven't touched the grass in 30 years. My wife and I like doing it. I still cut the grass.
Yeah.
I don't have a massive yard. I do have a riding lawnmower sometimes I use, but it's just something we like to do.
Yeah.
So I do it.
Yeah.
I have other people like Jonathan who said, I have no interest in cutting the grass. I'm paying somebody to go do it. And I think it's the same relationship that you can have with your, some people, it's like, you can have with your CPA. I don't now bring in, a dump truck load of mulch and spend the day doing it around my yard. I think my back appreciates that. But I pay somebody to go do those things.
Yeah.
So you got to figure out, I think your point really is maybe kind of the key to this is you got to pay somebody to help you get the right information and the right advice and the right guidance.
Yeah.
And if it means you got to pay a little more on the front end, great. And if it means that's the way you do it the rest of your career, great. Just don't overpay for somebody who's charging you a lot of money and you're not getting anything
Agreed.
in return.
Yeah.
And I think that's it. And again, we can provide that to you. We certainly are giving recommendations. We've got a CPA firm now that's associated with our team, and they're going to serve our people well. But if you've got a great CPA, great.
Yeah.
Use them.
Yeah.
We just want to make sure you're getting the guidance and advice that you want. And I think that's part of, as you go to build that team, your CPA is going to be an important one. Talk to people in your community, figure out who it is. And if you're unhappy, talk to them about why they're not meeting the level of service, and then potentially go find somebody who will.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, Scott, before we wrap up is it used to be that the CPA had to be, 5 miles from you. That's not really the case anymore. So a lot of the CPA firms, for example, our CPA firm, it's nationwide. So we can help, or a lot of these CPA firms can help nationwide and, with phone calls, Zoom technology, all this stuff. So, but some people still value having the CPA down the road, and that's completely reasonable, right? Some people want to meet face to face, and that's completely great. Just figure out what's important to you.
Absolutely. Well,
all right,
Scott.
Scott.
I think we've hopefully helped you here thinking about, with your CPA, make sure that you're getting the level of service that you want, that you're clear with your expectations, and that you're talking to them and they're educating you on what's going on in your practice. And then again, we'll talk next episodes. I think we're going to get into your good stuff of business and tax planning of what's that next level, what's that next step that you'll make as an owner that's going to save you a lot of money. Put it in your pocket, not Uncle Sam's.
Yeah.
So
Can't wait for that one, Scott. Until next one.
Next one.